in schools, you've got this kind of ethnic and cultural construction about what it means to be Māori, but actually there are things about your Māori experience which don't fit into that. And actually when you run up against colleagues who are non-Māori telling you that there are these particular ways to be Māori that are actually in conflict with your lived Māori experience, then there's something really wrong with that. I mean, you shouldn't be told, particularly by non-Māori, how to be more Māori or how to think in a way that I guess is in line with the official curriculum. And this is where you start to distinguish between an official curriculum and a hidden curriculum. So whereas that first question was touching on an official curriculum statement that attends to, I guess, biculturalism, text and identity, and it has all these kinds of ways of teaching that are associated with that. The teachers that I was interviewing were speaking about a hidden curriculum, which involves questions about race and ways of being Māori that aren't acknowledged by the policies that the education system releases. So from that interview process, where I was like, okay, there's something happening here that's hidden and not recognised, through official ministry policies, I was able to see that from what the participants were telling me, teaching was very problematic for Māori, and that it wasn't being this big inclusive project that it was claiming to be. But then I found also that as teachers, we all kind of play a part in perpetuating this hidden curriculum because we are kind of immersed, I guess, in the system that we do it without conscious thought. So what was great about interviewing Māori English teachers is that they were able to intuitively know that there was something wrong going on, and they could sense that there was a hidden curriculum, but they couldn't actually put a name to it or give it a language, I suppose, because it's not something that we talk about in education. We don't talk about race in New Zealand. There was this sort of intuitive thing going on, which then led to the second phase of the research project, which was about going into the classrooms of 4 of those interviewed participants. So four people volunteered. And then I was able to observe them as they taught, and I guess I was able to look critically again at the way that particular things were included to do with Te Ao Māori, particular things were excluded, and that allowed me to give a shape to this hidden curriculum. Should I talk about the shape of that hidden curriculum?
Please do.
So there were certain ways that teachers teach when they approach issues of race. Are that they soften their language when they talk about race-related issues. They might use softer words to describe racism or avoid the word at all. They might help make Pākehā students feel okay when it comes to talking about race issues, even when the content isn't okay. And even when the perpetrators of colonial violence are Pākehā themselves. And so in doing so, by softening that language, then that helps to sort of create distance between actually the perpetrators of colonial violence, being related to the students in a way. Many Pākehā students, and not everyone obviously, but many are beneficiaries of what happened in the history. Yes, it was a whole lot of softening and kind of tactical manoeuvring around difficult subjects. In terms of curriculum, like I said earlier on, there was certain things about mātauranga Māori or Te Ao Māori that teachers felt more comfortable talking about, which is to do with the nicer aspects of Māori culture, I suppose. And I drew quite heavily on Joanna Kidman's work in a paper called Pedagogies of Forgetting, where she describes the way that we frame our colonial past as privileging lovely knowledge about our past. So she uses that term actually. And I took that term and I applied it to what I was seeing in terms of the kind of curriculum content that was being taught around Te Ao Māori in relation to Māori texts. And then the flip side of lovely knowledge is difficult knowledge, which didn't seem to feature in the curriculum content around Māori text at all. And then the other part of the hidden curriculum is to do with or there's a policy aspect as well. So there was a critique of the way that education policy sets up the preconditions to make lovely knowledge and the softening of teaching pedagogies to do with race more manageable.
I think that the idea from Kidman about lovely knowledge, and I've got a quote here, a desire to create strong, redemptive narratives about harmonious race relations, was a really eye-opening thing to read about in this PhD, the polar opposites of lovely knowledge and difficult knowledge, and trying, I guess, to quantify or make tangible how that softening takes place within a classroom context. And it's interesting that you mentioned that in some cases the teachers knew that there was this hidden curriculum but couldn't quite figure out how it actually manifests, and that idea of lovely knowledge and, I guess, trying to create redemptive narratives about these harmonious race relations, even if that isn't the case, is a really interesting way to try and explain exactly what is going on in a classroom.
Yeah, there's layers upon layers of complexity there. I mean, one of them is that tied in with our identity as teachers, attributes or qualities around wanting to help people, wanting students to do their best in school. And so you can see how an avoidance of difficult subjects in the name of ensuring that student's going to do well academically and achieve well academically, how that can happen. Often a lot of choices as teachers are made on behalf of what we think students will best engage with. So if we think, Pākehā students aren't going to want to necessarily hear about difficulties of colonisation because it might compromise their grades, you can see how that becomes part of the equation. I think as teachers too, we have these identities where we are successful at school, therefore the school system is set up in a way that should encourage success for more, particularly when you're invested in it as a teacher. It's difficult to kind of see the flip side of education failure, I guess, or see the things that could be making life harder for students. In terms of redemptive narratives and creating this kind of, I guess, imaginary kind of race relations narrative where things are harmonious between Māori and Pākehā now, and the difficulties of our difficult histories and colonial pasts have been resolved. I mean, that's created, like I said, partly by the way that the Ministry of Education has created these policies that really centre whiteness, puts whiteness at the core of the way all the other operations of schooling play out. And what I mean by that is that it's to have policy documents that talk about Māori, like culturally responsive pedagogy, and and Māori inclusion or Pasifika inclusion. I mean, automatically that language is problematic because if Māori and Pasifika were equitably included, we wouldn't need something to distinguish them as different.
Thanks for watching PhD Unpacked. If you enjoyed that little snippet and you want to watch the whole interview and have access to a whole bunch of extra stuff surrounding the PhD Unpacked project, head over to Patreon and become a patron. Patreon.com/PhD Unpacked.